Oh. Oh my.
So it's definitely started.
Okay. So we thought maybe we'd wait 5 minutes, but maybe we won't.
No, we'll wait 5 to formally start, yeah.
There's MBB. Okay, Fierce Pussy is in the house.
So now we can start, right?
Exactly. Do I have sunglasses on? No.
No.
Okay, good. That's good. Look, this is how you spell it. G-I-O-I-A. Joy.
Oh, how gorgeous.
Yeah. That's my dad. Oh my God, you got closer. That's scary.
We're advancing. Just wait till Q&A. Well, we just figured if other people come in and.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was funny because I didn't see the move. I just looked up. We saw Nope. Exactly. We just saw Nope, the Peel film. That's fabulous. And there's have you seen it? Nope. Oh, it's brilliant. It's super brilliant. You got to see it.
So Joey wanted to know whether your computer will be muted.
Yes, it is. It is. And so tell him not to worry. We're hearing it out of the speakers out of your computer, which is what we tested on. Just like when we did the test. Hi.
Joey thinks he hears the audience speaking from your computer.
I think you can hear, can't you? But you can't. If my sound was on, we'd have a really loud interference thing going on right now.
Okay, he says the mic doesn't show that it's off.
Tell him I maybe didn't turn the mic off, but I turned the sound up. So there's not.
Okay, so maybe turn both off.
Okay, so hello to the big of you. And I exit full screen. And now where is the mic? All right. So let's put it here.
Yeah.
Another minute.
Just 1 minute, yeah. So we're just.
I just told him my son was off and would start in 1 minute. Okay. And my phone sound was off.
Okay. So let me just, I'm gonna turn the, so I'll turn our video on.
Yep.
Yep.
And Joey could turn his video on.
Yep. Or unless he doesn't want to be there for the.
Oh, no, there he is.
Okay, great. Okay. All right.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Andrew Arnott, owner of the Tibor Dinaj Gallery. Thank you for joining us for tonight's conversation with Joy Episalla, Joe H. Casid, and Joey Tang. The speakers will discuss Joy's current exhibition, Crack, Full, Burn, Bright, now extended through August 5th. We are also celebrating the publication of the exhibition catalog, beautifully designed by Joy, with essays by Jill and Joey, for those at home. Beautiful, thank you, Joy. The 44-page catalog is $20 and can be purchased at the gallery at 11 Rivington Street, or you're welcome to send a request by email to info@tibordinaj.com. Tonight's conversation will be 1 hour. Joy, Jill, and Joey will speak for about 45 minutes. We will then devote the final 15 minutes to questions. If you're watching on Zoom, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A button. Visitors here at the gallery are welcome to raise their hand and the panelists will call on you. After the conversation, we will host a catalog release celebration from 7 until 8 p.m. Joy's exhibition has received 2 lovely reviews, one in 2 Coats of Paint, written by Adam Simon, and the other in the New Yorker, written by Joanna Fateman. Bomb Magazine also recently published an amazing interview with Joy and Ksenia Soboleva. If you're watching by Zoom, you can find links to these pieces in the chat section. We also have printed copies available here at the gallery. If you've not seen the exhibition, I hope you'll have a chance to do so by August 5th. The gallery is now open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'll now spend a few moments introducing the speakers. Thank you. Joy Episalla repositions the photographic and video moving image in the territory of sculpture. Since the 1980s, Episalla has exhibited widely in the United States and in Europe, including solo exhibitions at Participant Inc., NYC, International Center of Photography, NYC, and Gallery Joseph Tang in Paris. Their work has been featured in exhibitions at Greater New York, MoMA PS1, Artist Space NYC, ICA Philadelphia, Centre Pompidou in Paris, Central for Contemporary Art Belgium. They are the recipient of a 2003 Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award. Episalla also is a founding member of the queer art collective Fierce Pussy. Their work will be featured in chapter 7 of Arms, Ache, Avid, Aeon. Nancy Brooks Brody, Joy Episalla, Zoe Leonard, Carrie Yamaoka, Fierce Pussy Amplified at Palais de Tokyo in Paris in 2023. A theorist, historian, and practicing artist, Jill H. Casid holds the appointment of Professor of Visual Studies in the departments of Art History and Gender Women Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Casid is currently completing Necro Landscaping, the first part of a 2-book project on form at the edges of life. Casid is the author of Sowing Empire, Landscape and Colonization, Scenes of Projection, Recasting the Enlightenment Subject, which is being translated into Spanish and forthcoming from Metalis Bacedos Press, and the co-edited collection of Art History in the Wake of Global Turn. Recent articles have appeared in Art in America, Photography and Culture, LA Review of Books, Women in Performance, TDR, and Journal of Visual Culture. Casid's artwork has been exhibited nationally and internationally, including in recent and upcoming exhibitions at Signs and Symbols and Ford Foundation Gallery in New York. Casid's film entitled Melancholy as Medium will be part of Documenta 15. Their artist book, Kissing on Main Street, is in the collection of Leslie Lohman Museum of Art. Joey Tang is a Hong Kong-born American curator, artist, writer in non-hierarchical order. Tang is a curator of the multimedia chapter as exhibition project Arms Ache, Avid Aeon, Fierce Pussy Amplified with Joy Episalla, in which Joy Episalla is a part, along with Nancy Brooks Brody, Zoe Leonard, and Carrie Yamaoka, and Fierce Pussy. The project has been cited at Beeler Gallery at Columbus College of Art and Design and ICA Philadelphia. Forthcoming chapters will take place at Palais de Tokyo, Paris in 2023, and in form of a book published by Dancing Fox Press. Tang has served as arts editor at N+1, curator of Palais de Tokyo, director of exhibitions at Beeler Gallery at Columbus College of Art and Design, digital community manager at Denniston Hill, and is the current director of CADIST in San Francisco. Join me in welcoming the speakers. Thank you.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, Joy. Hi, Jill. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Great. Thank you so much, Andrew and Liz from Thibaut de Nage for hosting this rapturous exhibition and this talk. I'm so thrilled tonight to be in the company of Jill, Casid, and of course, Joy Episalla as companions of this body of work. I wish I could be there with you in person, but speaking through the ether also feels very appropriate to this work. I'm gonna share my screen for those who are online. Maybe, I don't know if the weather is the same as when this documentation was taken today, but I thought I'd start by describing the materials of the work in the exhibition, what Joy had termed photograms. Each is a unique work of photographic print made with the technique of photogram, which is a basic way in which composed of three elements: an object, light, and light-sensitive paper. The object casts a shadow onto light-sensitive paper and exposing the area where the light is not blocked. After exposure to light source, the light-sensitive paper is put through a sequence of chemical baths. Developer bath, or in French, révélateur, revealer, which reveals the image. Then a stop bath, which is usually just water and which arrests the developing process. Then a fixed bath that stabilizes the image. And finally, a wash bath of water that clears all the chemical off the paper itself. And then the paper is let dry on a rack or in a machine. Embedded in this is an individual process of controlling and modulating how much light the paper receives, the movement of the object or the paper, and the duration of the chemical baths, in particularly the developer chemical. With Joy's photogram, which implies the action-oriented nature of her work, she's stripping down this cameraless operation. It's objectless. And you're adding, Joy, to this simple and highly individualized process, a slew of experimentation and inventory of techniques you accrued. Heating, sometimes with a torch, reordering of steps of chemical baths, of mystics and chants, intention through the knowledge of these movements in the darkroom, through the hands and bodies, treating, wrangling of paper, and a private choreographic wrestling of time and material. So folding, creasing, manipulating paper, routing liquid chemicals through the undulation in trays and troughs, the paper is transformed in various stages of wetness and dryness through additional folds and creases, and by challenging the paper's structural integrity beyond its surface, revealing its substrate through compressing, cracking, and singeing the paper against type by buffing the matte surface to shine or dulling its gloss surface. If we turn our attention to this work, which is the largest work in the exhibition, it's 44-foot long, photogram from August 2018, and which is an ever-evolving work. It is installed from almost the top of the wall at an angle, dangling and hinged in one corner, like the effects of time where the other corner may have lost its tact. It drags itself through gravity onto the ground and slits itself in a way that seems to hold itself up, ribboning out in many folds and compressions. This, and as other photograms around the room, are agents of change, steeping in between states. Through the mutability of the paper itself, they're active beings that unfold here, now, and over time, a there that is still here, a here that is already there. They're active on so many multiple levels: the physical, structural, the political, philosophical. They invoke for me proximity and distances, activating intimacy and memory, tactility and desire, the present and the residual, control and letting go, trial and knowing, impact and impression. They invoke structurally flatness and volume, front and back, top and bottom, edge and layers, beginning and end, new and worn, weakening and hardening, dissolution and resilience. Resilient made stronger through channeling, challenging integrity that only can be amplified through the handling. The thickness of the paper can hold an expense, enjoys words, carrying its histories. Pay particular attention to the fold of the back of the paper to the front and the ways in which light seeps through where the paper has been rubbed thin. They invoke matters outside of ourselves, the human bodies toward the natural world, waterways, tree bark, fossils, mountain range, ridges, parched and scorched earth, glacial formation, constellations. They invoke worn objects, cracked leather, sun-damaged Mars surfaces of plastic, fabric, ink drips, crumbled receipts found in the bottom of our bags. They invoke the internal, physical, the bodily, synapses, arteries, thought patterns, memories, or lost of, energy fields, retinal persistence, blood vessels, cellular mapping of bodies changing with and against time. And finally, they invoke the metaphorical and philosophical. They document a life lived of scenarios, situations, impressions. They register trauma and make space for resistance and for healing. They span a beginning and an end and find the cracks and connect them. It's ultimately an unfurling of openness and trust. The paper is not and never will be a blank slate. Each print is a pliant forward motion of articulation and rearticulation of what the future holds and holding within it its futures. So with the spirit of openness and trust, I will pause here and speak onto Jill Casid. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Joey. It's always so exciting to be in dialogue. I'm just going to take a moment to pull up the PowerPoint so we can see some of these beautiful photograms together while I share with you the fact that I've followed Joy Episalla's experimentations with the sculptural potentials of the photograph. as processual silver gelatin object since the 1990s. But I began thinking with and writing about Joy's profound transformation of all we thought we knew about what photography is and what it can do as both an artistic and an activist medium. When I saw their solo exhibition, Street View Rear Window at Participant Inc. in 2015, shout out to Leah Gangitano. Well, whether Leah Gangitano is here or not, a major shout out. Since that time, I've had the chance to witness their galvanic emphasis on the slow looking and deep listening demanded by the perceptual encounter. The perceptual encounter being arguably central to the processual aspect of this work, and that perceptual encounter as a transformative portal. I've also had the great honor and pleasure to have the chance to think out loud together and write alongside the 4 chapters of The Unfolding, choreographed by Joey Tang of Armsay Gabadeon, Nancy Brooks Brody, Joy Episalla, Zoe Leonard, Carrie Yamaoka, Fierce Pussy Amplified at the Beeler in Columbus, Ohio, its 5th chapter at the ICA in Philadelphia, and the planning of its 6th and 7th chapters, the book in exciting development, and the exhibition chapter opening in 2023. We're all in excited anticipation of that, the Palais de Tokyo in Paris. It was especially exciting, though, to write for Crack, Fold, Burn Bright, and the book we're launching today, as I've been inspired, deeply inspired by thinking with the provocation of Joy's praxis of the foldogram, since I participated in 2018 in a symposium that was convened to reckon with the surveilling and extractive violences of photography. Photography arguably being a dominant at this point, not just medium, but the sea in which we swim or drown in this situation of, call it what you will, but I'm going to use the very clunky global heteropatriarchal racial capitalism, because if you didn't know that it was heteropatriarchal before, you know, we're in it now.
By the way.
This dread sea in which we're made to live our dying on a dying planet, a condition I've been calling the necrocene. I published that thinking in the article Thanatographies. I can't resist the necessity of renaming photography in order to dislodge what we somehow imagine as an inevitability. And I think that that's necessary, not just to honor what Joy does with the foldogram linguistically, but what Joy does with the foldogram in terms of process and form, to entirely undo the logic of what we think is the photographic. That piece is behind an academic journal paywall, one of the blights of being an academic, but I'm happy to share a PDF. So, you know, just let me know and I'll give you the hookup. What distinguishes Joy's work with the photograph is the way it arcs back to a reconsideration of the photogenic. If we think about photogenic as also being the power to give light to face or image, that is the action of light, also well beyond the image, and the larger question of agency of who and what makes a photograph that runs through all of Episalla's work. The extended exploration of cameraless photography that materializes in the sculptural objects that Episalla calls foldograms, and note that too tucked into that word, subversively bends the rules and logics of photography as representational window onto a world out there, to demonstrate the materializing power of an abstraction that's neither triumphant nor transcendent, but rather fragile, delicate, and worn. And yet in the exercise of folds that don't break their paper supports, Episalla's practice of the foldogram demonstrates a resilience that's not merely aesthetic, but also political. In our moment of increased precarization, Episalla takes that naked, cameraless, chemical suffused and light sensitive paper process of making rather than taking, that doesn't capture, but instead refuses the extraction of world as image, to compose instead directly with what decomposes, working with those materials often marked as frankly unstable, non-archival, decaying, and frankly even sometimes expired. Episalla's praxis of the photogram does not just release photography from realist modes of representation that undergird photography's biopolitical registration and surveilling functions as an apparatus of the insecurity state and its counter operations as an activist medium of forensic evidence, often the role that only activist role that we imagine photography can occupy. But I'm going to be excited to talk about all the other activist ways that photography can work besides capturing an image. Instead, Joy's work presses the emanatory, even frankly incantatory power of the unruly other side of the practice of the photogram, not as the branding stamp of a proprietary claim on its contact with the thing, traceable in the ordering singe of its confirming likeness, but rather to open its careworn material objecthood out onto possible futures, that too, that are also frankly sensed right here. In the uneven creases of the praxis of the foldogram that folds back and forth, Episalla's extended exploration of cameraless photography materializes speculation about the wild magic, even frankly call it witchcraft, of the spectral action of emanations toward. Yet Episalla's praxis of the foldogram does much of its work in the register of resilient refusal. Neither lens-based nor exhibited behind protected glass, these not images offer neither windows onto a world nor mimetic surface impressions. The foldogram isn't made by placing an object onto a light-sensitive substrate. Using the plasticity of sometimes old and expired papers that Episalla crumples until the paper is deeply worn but not split apart, the foldogram doesn't offer a smooth surface and thus refuses the possibility of a simultaneous or even exposure. In working with the wild performativity, which I think is important to grasp here, of the other side of the photogram in the unpredictable and errant agencies of what photographic materials can do when not enlisted to capture likeness or material evidence of a contact with the object, not the leaves, for example, placed onto light-sensitive materials that one associates with the very beginnings of photography. The practice of the foldogram doesn't merely refuse control, but also forgoes the fictions of complete or final development. It's not merely that many of the foldograms are so large that it's possible to immerse them there entirely in a chemical bath, nor is it merely that their folds produce ripples and flows, unpredictably driving the chemical reactions in uncontrolled directions. Time and space traveling to transit the currents of otherwise possibility in defiance of the trauma regime of photographic surveillance may frankly remind us crucially of our resilient pliability too. But most vitally of all, in refusing to bend to bans on being and becoming, Episalla's praxis of a wild, let's call it a melancholy joy, dares to hold open instead a portal onto transformation in all its senses. The sense of the ostensibly settled dimensional plane as unfolding onto a threshold that could transport us was already there in Episalla's praxis with the foldogram begun well before the pandemic. But it now resonates strongly with Arundhati Roy's call for the pandemic as a portal between one world and the next, a gateway whose passage demands a radical break with the killing normal. Perhaps we might say, after Adrian Rich's burning oneself out, that the real lesson for how to burn bright is to burn as if our radiant fire could go on burning, because there's nothing in life that hasn't fed that fire. But Episalla's work here with the foldogram, I couldn't resist giving another name, that is incantography, also calls up as it calls on a lingering liquid intelligence that pools our bright burning, because after all, the hot, as we know, can also be the wet. Thank you. So I know that Joey and I had queued up some questions, and I think Joey, you may have also had a little more that you wanted to share.
Yeah, sure. Well, Joy, I'm curious if you might want to tell us, or if you could tell us a bit about your relationship to sculpture and photography, not only in this big piece, but in ways in which it informs all the other works in the exhibition.
Well, first I want to thank everybody for coming. And it's very nice to see you all, even with your masks on. And I want to thank Andy and Liz from Tibor. They've been lovely to work with. And I want to thank Joey for your lovely words as always. And for Jill for your lovely words. Very good. Really, is it really much for me to say? I don't think so, really. Well, I think in general, as we all, know, a photograph is an object, right? And I somehow, for a very, very, very long time, kept thinking about how, to me, that objectness is something that I've always wanted to push farther along. And I think I see it as I look back in my work, that I think that there's some early pictures, just, and not even, I could even go back farther than this, but I didn't. So it's good, like the total end of it. I don't know if you can, yeah. So you have to go through all of them. Now you have to see all of them.
But this book's
But
perfect.
it's, yeah, okay, more, keep going, another one more time. Yeah, so these, for example, are unique silver gelatin prints that are quite large. They're by 5 feet by 42 inches. It's fiber paper. And the way that these were hung were off the top of the wall, and they came down off the wall and they curved back onto the wall. And so I kept sort of fighting with this idea of I didn't want it framed, and I didn't want to crop something, and I wanted this endlessness feeling. And so again, to me, they were more object than something two-dimensional. And I had been working in black and white for quite a long time. And this is another one. And then I started working in color for a while. And again, photographing these very mundane objects that you live with all the time, curtains or carpets or whatever. But I kept seeing them as not, almost like a folly, like an English folly, it looks like a real object in space. And so I kept trying to push that. And with these color ones, they were sandwich mounted between plexi, like 1/2-inch plexiglass on the front, so that they almost have a paperweight, magnified size. So it would be on this sort of grand scale. And in this one, the pillow piece, it's like 15 feet long, and it's, again, so it's sitting on the floor and leaning against the wall. So again, yeah, it was contained within these rectangles still, but it was breaking with space, and it was breaking with the wall. And that, excuse me, what was usually on the wall could now sit on the floor. And so I kept pushing that, thinking in that range, and eventually started to recognize that, well, actually, why bother? I can move away from something that we recognize that's representational. I can move away. As I move away from that, I'm looking at the paper. And what's the paper capable of? And it becomes the object, right? And so I'm going backwards here. A mutual friend of a number of people here, Thomas Fougerolles, who's a painter and really interesting artist, invited Carrie and I and Brody as well. And I don't know if there's other people here that did the project. And Glenn, sorry, darling, yes. I knew that, right. Anyway, to do this photogram project. And everybody was given, RC paper, which is actually what this paper is. Although I have worked with fiber paper with these as well, but this in fact is RC. And that image you're seeing right now is, so I decided we were going to Normandy, and I was gonna try and make these photograms at the edge of the water because my mom's brother is buried in Normandy, and that was her favorite brother. And he was a journalist and a writer, and I never met him. And so this was my chance to visit the grave. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go to the edge of the water in this incredible, if you've ever been to Normandy, it's beauty and tragedy, and it's all there. And I'm going to go to the edge of the water where the water meets the sand, and I'm going to make the photograms. Well, problem was we left Paris so quick to get to Normandy that I forgot the paper. Put a little wrinkle in that one. So our friend Virginia that we were staying with asked a friend, and the friend's brother was a photographer, and borrowed some paper from them. And we went out to the beach at night, and it was almost a full moon. And I had one of those wind up, and so I opened the first box of, she gave me 2 boxes of paper, and I opened the first one and it's empty. And I opened the second one, and there are 3 shards, this being one of them. They were all like this, one was like this. And I think to myself, what I know of this person are other people's memories, fragments. And this makes total sense. And I felt like this person was communing with me, really. And so I did. I made them there, right there, and I stuck them in a plastic bag, and we brought them back to Paris, and I developed them in the darkroom, and this is what came out. And I was like, whoa. And then I was thinking, well, now what happens, So I thought, oh, I'll just make the ocean in the darkroom. I mean, that's what one would do, right? And so that's what I did. But for this project, we were using RC paper. And it's the ugliest paper really in the world. I mean, it looks beautiful behind glass and in a photograph, but if you really have to touch it. Anyway, after that whole process, I come back home with a lot of tests and pieces, and I was just like, what? I hate this paper, but I don't want to throw it away because there were some quite beautiful things. So actually this one is one of those remnants from that photogram project. And if you look closely, you'll see there's bubbles in it, like, the suds of the ocean. It's there. And so I started reusing these pieces of paper and kind of started manipulating them. And as I was doing that, I started realizing there was the object. So there was, I'd succeeded. I'd found how this silver gelatin piece of paper that's always been an object, I'm just going to push your objectness further. And that point of moving forward became the photograms, because I was using light, no camera, no negative, and I was using darkroom processes, not necessarily in order, nor necessarily, I'll use old chemicals that are kind of polluted. And I found that all the things that really bugged me about editioning, I had to keep the paper flat. Or even with those color ones, I was printing those color photographs of the pillows, but every time I'd go to the mounter, if there was one ding, that was going to be a big problem, which I found quite boring. And this was really a way of freeing myself. And I feel like we're all at a place right now where, oh, you got to figure out how to be free in this mess, And I feel like, that's where I found myself. And it was very liberating in that way to not have to pay attention to rules or regulations or whatever. I hand it off to whoever wants to go there. That's fine, but I can't, as my French friends say, they say I can't. And so I can't. And in fact, I've just been having a blast, really. But I found that the chemicals and the paper do these really quite intricate and amazing things. And if you look at some of these very closely, like that black one there, in the lower left corner, you'll see that there's a part where it almost looks like it has stratified the surface, because all the white that you're seeing is the paper behind the emulsion. The emulsion has been cracked. I think it's static. I think that when I've hit it with heat, there's a static, and it kind of, it's like that. And I found it in most of them that have any of the cracking. It's a very, very peculiar way of the lines spreading. They almost look like synapses, which started to make me think about electricity and all kinds of things. And so there's something very kinetic and alive in them. Again, foldogram, I think it feels like it, you know, they have a future because they don't have to be static. They're objects, they're not static. They can be installed in many different ways. That one on the wall, that's the first time it's ever been on the wall. It's actually been on the floor in, I don't know if I have that. It's in the catalog. There's a picture. I tried in the catalog to include things that you wouldn't, you know, necessarily get to see, but, you know, so holding its shape, but, you know, against the wall on the floor, some memory of the pillow pieces in that way, maybe. This one here has only been on the wall, and so now it has met the floor. I don't know if that even answered your question, Joey, actually, frankly. I just went off on some sort of tangent here. But you could clarify, you know.
I think yes, it absolutely did and more to think about how the edge of water and the edge of paper and fragments and testing had become really your inventory of techniques and toolbox, so that each work in itself, it's a test, and it's its own being, and it's not a test for something else because it cannot be replicated. So it's this constant engagement with the present. It makes up all the iterations, that kind of multiple. They're propositional. They make relations their mode of being. Maybe Jill, you have some thoughts you want to add to that.
Oh, well, I was just so happy that you shared with us the version of the genealogy or origin story for the foldogram process, with the making of the first photogram out of the fragment of paper. That one of the books that I always wanted to write and never wrote, but did all this research for many years ago, was one that I've been calling The Volatile Image, that was inspired in part by all the chemical experimentation at the ostensible, well, frankly, prehistory, the before of photography. And we talk about photography as if it was an inevitability, that low 1839 in France and in England, you know, this what was always going to be the fixing and capturing of an image was finally discovered. And we know that it's a more global story. We know that there were so many women involved in that pursuit, but it's also the case that all kinds of really exciting chemical experimentation was being done under the names, frankly, of witchcraft and alchemy, in the protean possibilities of matter. And even if we stay with William Henry Fox Talbot, his preferred name was skiography, which would be working with shadows rather than light, and compared photography to natural magic. And so your description of your protocol as a kind of incantation, I think, pulls us away from this idea that photography was ever about fixing. And in opening that up, I think it gets, well, frankly, excitingly wild that we've so underexplored what photochemicals and papers can do. And also, frankly, what we've assumed is the lack in matter that we've consigned to be, frankly, dead and immobile. So the question of agency beyond the image, what it might mean to, for example, honor the dead besides giving them a face or a body in photography, what would it mean to work with the dead in ways that aren't also just about mourning? I know that that's my obsession, and that was what was undergirding the thanatography's piece, thinking with your work, but I was so excited that you recounted the beginning of the process and going out to Normandy, and wondered if this was a moment to also maybe talk a little bit more about what you've shown us photography can do in terms of memory, in terms of activism, and in terms of undoing what's been ostensibly consigned to death by, yeah, showing us what photochemicals and paper can do when not enlisted to fix an image or even participate in the image regime.
Well, I think that when you look at a photograph, you're talking about an embedded image that got there through the use of light, most probably with the use of a negative. You know, if you think of, I'm sure you all have photographs of grandparents or great grandparents, and they're all standing very still because they had to be captured for a really, you know, the exposure to the paper had to be for a really long time. And you might talk about that as also grasping their soul, right? I mean, there's been lots of things written about that. And I think that there's this time quality. All of this has a lot to do with time, not only time forward, but time backwards, because you're talking about in the moment that they're made from their process, which in many, sometimes is quite performative, right? There's all this action that's going on to make them. But then what's interesting to me, and what I think we talk about in memory, or the moments in a photograph, the photograph is capturing a moment that we hold on to. I think in these, you're getting something that's moving back and forth, right? So not only its beginning, but its future. There's an anticipation that can happen here. And so that's, you know, that's also a way of taking everything you've already experienced, or I have in my life, and moving it forward. You know, I don't know why, but I think of this often. Carrie and I were invited to do this project in the Western Desert of Egypt. And I remember, so you're camping, not in a tent, you're camping in a semicircle under the stars, and you freeze at night, and during the day it's like hot as hell, right? But it's very dry, it's great for your skin. Kind of mummified, it's fabulous. But I remember, and also I was, to you know, be honest, I was smoking a lot of hash. So, but I remember, you know, the stars are flipped because you're on the other side of the equator, right? And I remember just being out there, and it's vast, and you're looking at all the sand, and it's going like this. And there's a lot of undulation in these that really remind me of those places. And even though those places are in a way dead, you do have the sky and you have the air, and there are certain animals that live there. There are ravens that come every morning, and you see little mouse prints and fox prints, but it's pretty desolate, and it goes on and on and on. And for someone who's grown up around water, I would always keep thinking, oh, it's out there somewhere. I feel it, it's out there somewhere. But I can remember being at night, just sitting in the vastness of these undulating, it goes on forever. It's very beautiful. And the sky is so dark, and you see so many stars, and everything's sort of topsy-turvy, and I probably was too. But there's a way in which in that moment, I felt very tiny. I was a speck, like a speck of the sand, and I could see behind me, and I could see what was coming in front of me. And not just for myself, but just really huge. It was huge. And there's something about that I always think about, that there's like a micro, macro, micro, macro. We're constantly moving in between those, and it's almost like the ocean, right? In and out. And so that movement is something to do with what we've lost and what we bring with us and how we move forward.
Well, it's a planetary practice then, right? And it also enlists what we would presume are ecological and also, dare one say it, otherworldly agencies. So the agents of change here, making the foldograms agents, but also gathering the agencies of what exceeds you too. Just really exciting.
Yeah, and I also think that, all this cracking and folding and pushing and, there's a lot of energy in that.
Mhm.
And that energy, because I guess there's the other piece of it, right, is so you have a piece of paper and you crumble it up, and then because it has memory, it unfolds itself. Well, these are probably still relaxing. It's not like it's been really solidified or I've smushed it into place and so it has to stay there. They're going to get, this will get rolled up again. So it will have its creases from this time, which adds to its history. And I will roll it up. And then for the next time, it will have that it's done before and now be something different and new. So there's this play. You guys have questions, or do you guys, not me?
Oh, shall we open it to questions now? So those of you who've joined us via Zoom, we'd be delighted to field questions if you'd like to use the Q&A function. And also delighted to, open things up to questions from this.
Or comments?
Or thoughts as well. If you would like to share your thoughts in the chat, we'd be happy to.
And if not, I'm sure we can go on. We can be highly entertaining.
Oh, I
can't we?
have no doubt that we
Yes.
can continue this.
You have a question? Oh, it was just a wave.
Oh, me?
No, hi.
It's really lovely to hear you talk about your work.
Thank you.
It's like almost like a studio visit.
Cool, good.
That's my fun.
Thank you.
So for those of you on Zoom, we were actually, thank you for that, remarking on the excitement of getting to, well, and frankly, intimacy of watching you unfold what's here, as if we were getting to do a private studio visit.
Okay.
Would you mind speaking about the pieces over your shoulder and the process, especially the use of a blowtorch? And I found that to be so amazing, to the point where you burn right through the paper. And could you talk about making that piece maybe, or some of the others where you're really getting down and dirty with the paper of the whole process?
The paper is, It's also RC, but it's actually a glossy paper. It's just very similar to that one. And it was very, well, it was very like black and white and gray, and I didn't like it. We'll start there. And so, you know, as we all do, and Carrie's very familiar, I'm using one of your terms as a dud. Right? I mean, you know, you work and you have duds, and but they hang around because somehow there's something there that you respond to in some way. And I had been heating them all along, but I started thinking, well, we could go a step further and use like a propane torch. And so that's what I used on this. And what I think is pretty fascinating is, if you look up close, all this, what you see is gray or singed, I think is actually the silver salts coming to the surface. And the more coppery is the singeing, you know, not letting it go totally on fire. But in the controlling of that, you know, like whatever I'm doing, there's some way in which the silver salts, I think, you get a metallic sense in them. Even in this one, the longer you look at it, because it was matte like this. And because I've worked the surface, kind of buffing it, I think that the silver in the paper reacts to all of that handling, in fact. And in fact, that's probably very true, because I have looked at old photographs I have, right? So, and you know, like of my grandmother, and you know, they're worn, and if you really look at them, and you put them in the light in a certain light, you see. So I think that that's kind of a little bit of what I'm playing off of, is what is in the paper. And so, you know, I did try to hold some of the glossiness, because I thought that was a quite nice texture to the what was happening in the rest of it, the burntness. So it's a lot of, you know, you're playing back and forth with it.
It's just not what you think about when you think about someone making a photograph. But it doesn't surprise me ever since I started to cut apart the couch.
You're right, Mary Jo. Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, it's also, again, you know, given the political climate, it's a way of attack, you know. There's an energy there that I get to play out, right, Barb? So, yeah.
Menacing.
Huh? Menacing? Yeah. But in fact, I don't know, menacing, yeah, but
Well, I'm just quoting.
I know, I heard that. I know, yeah. But I've also been thinking about damage and how we're all damaged, and using the damage in a positive way. I think that's really what really interests me. All the things you're not supposed to do. So the dinging of the edge, and it's supposed to be flat, and you're not supposed to have a fold or a crease or a crack, you know, or a rip or a tear. All those things become my instruments, or my lexicon, in a sense, for making these. And it's damage, and the damage is now in a positive sense. And I think, I mean, I could probably relate this to Fierce Pussy in the way that we took derogatory terms back to use them in the positive. I think I've learned from, you know, my own experience in life and what we've all had to deal with, that there's ways to, you know, grasp something that is coming at you and turn it around. And so there's something of that, I think, in the method.
I kept thinking about the multiple meanings of the word effects. And in photography, it's specifically like to hold something still, to not let it develop, or move any further, you fix it. So it has this, or to fix something with a stare, like to hold it still. But it also has this meaning of repair, something that's hard, restoring it to its former form, or taking it back to something.
Mhm.
And the refusal to fix in all of those senses is exactly what I feel is happening here, because it allow something to keep going past whatever is happening to it and whatever it's doing, and however it's contracting or relaxing. By not holding it still, it's also saying you don't need to repair it, you just keep moving forward.
Mhm.
I think that's such a radical form of optimism. You know, like, no, we don't have to put it back how it was.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't so grateful anyways, right? It's that.
Mhm.
And the other word I was thinking about is imprint.
Mhm.
And in photography, there's always this fine thing about capturing images, but there also is this imprinting that happens with light on paper.
That's right.
And I think that imagery can be really abstract as well.
That's right.
And what happens here for me also is this other kind of imprinting.
Mhm.
Like this is the record of the lived life. It's just not an image record. of
That's
it.
correct.
It's like a record of the lived life.
Mhm.
And all that the paper has lived through and all that he goes through with the paper.
Mhm.
And so for me, the recordings in this whole other register, yeah, it tells me a lot about, you know, the quality of living life.
Well, we have not well, a question from the.
Oh, Harold.
Yeah. So we,
Should I read that?
yeah,
Okay, I find the word incantography. Is that how you have it?
or incantography, whichever.
Incantography.
Since it's
such a-
neologism, you get to pronounce it however you want.
Such a perfectly apt term for describing your wondrous pieces. How does the terminology strike you? That would be me. Okay. I'll go along with that.
Phew. All right.
Well, I think, you
Oh,
know,
now I can breathe.
no, but I think, I mean, the title, right? Crack, fold, burn, bright. It is an incantation. You may use that incantation however you would like, you know. But it's very much from obviously the way in which these are made. But there, you know, their ability to change and shape shift, that's where I think something else also happens. So there's always something to think about in the future, you know? Yeah. How's that, Harold? Michelle says she's on her way here for the book signing. And I've gotten 4
Exclamations
thank
from,
you.
yes.
From Harold, so I think that was okay. Joey, hi.
I'm very much thinking about how, especially this one, we're seeing this burned, singed piece, how it makes physical the complexity of things that it's difficult to articulate in the world, socio-political, the emotional history, and how you manage to compress that into a piece of paper, at the same time insisting the complexity, it's that there's more than that as well. So I find that there's this kind of contradiction at play always in these works where it is just a piece of paper, but it is so complex. Why? And the fact that they're all unique, you cannot repeat this, seems to really sink in as to me as a documentation of the present, of something, of a whole set of ideas, of kind of social, political conversation, in ways where you seem to map out something that we couldn't quite articulate. Just a comment about how I keep finding the complexity within your work. Here, it seems almost like the wall behind it is seeping through, but maybe it's the paper. It's burning. It's the celluloid, the image of the film curling onto itself, and there's motion embedded in here too, which is also, I think, interesting in relation to your video work as well, which often focuses, and it's a static camera, whereas in the photograms, there are movements. So again, there's this resisting against what the medium is meant to do, and then by extension, resisting all sorts of things in the world that are meant to be. So I just find it so generative, this process.
I'm not sure how to say this, but I think the couch might reference it as well. Like when I see all the work doing now, I feel so lucky to have known your older work as well. And I feel all that history here. The deconstructing of the couch, seeing you show us the whole structure, show us what it's made of. And, I'm thinking of the first pieces that you break there's a fifth wall, the floor. The bookshelves, documenting the history of people's bookshelves. The curtains that you showed me, you were like, oh, those are just whatever objects, but they weren't. They were like these veils between this liminal space, edges of a piece of fabric, the removal of something from the wall. I'm just thinking of all the works that I've gotten to see through the years. Luckily, and I feel that all here, and yet they're left behind. I think there's room for them to come back.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Yeah. Well, that's what's been really great doing these chapters with Carrie and Brody and Zoe and Joey and Jill. And I mean, that we've gotten to put works together from all different periods of time at the same time. And that the conversation that happens is really pretty incredible. Not just between our own works from something from the 80s till now, but between ourselves. And I think we've all learned a lot from that too, of ways in which how something can read and how it can read totally different so much time later, but also hold its resonance from when it first became. So there's that movement again.
And just a whole life led that brings you to the moment of now, here, always.
I actually have like a segue into the catalog.
Oh,
which I haven't
okay.
seen, but I'm very excited. I imagine there's pictures in the catalog.
No,
And
none.
I'm thinking about
Not a
most of the
thing.
walls, which, we're attributing a lot of language to, but this idea of them being unfixed and relaxing, which I love. but curious your thoughts on how you're thinking of documentation as it does fix these works, and whether that's interesting to you, how it contributes to a catalog, and how this work and the others change if they're photographed in the future.
Well, like, we could take the big fold-around, like, this is its 6th iteration. And so what I did was I actually included all the iterations from before that, because I thought that would be, I mean, what does it mean if I say 6th iteration? It's all words, but I think if you get to see, if you can get to see that, like in the first chapter, it was horizontal on a wall, and it was actually hung low-ish, like maybe the bottom started like here, but maybe 2 feet off the floor, and it spanned, well, it's about 35 feet long, so it was maybe a 40-foot wall-ish. But that was really interesting as a way of starting it, that it was flat against the wall. What's been really great to do it here was that it had the ability to be seen from outside and inside, and that's pretty unique. It's usually, I mean, obviously I could have placed it in the middle of the room and you could have been on either side of it, but there's something about it, first of all, being the first thing that you see if you look in, and then what are you seeing? And well, did it fall off the wall? I mean, there's, there's all these questions that I think come up, and I like all the questions, whatever they mean. So in trying to do the catalog, that's what I was thinking about, to give a viewer who, maybe didn't get to see one in whatever. So, this was it at Leslie Wellman. So, it starts on the wall and it goes onto the floor and then it comes back up again. Oh, Carrie Yamaoka has a question.
I just wanted to say something in response to Gary also, that I agree that that's a really good question, and I feel like the work resists documentation.
Absolutely.
Very strongly.
Mhm.
So there's an interesting irony in the fact that one attempts to document, because, well, of course, but there's also an impossibility,
Absolutely.
failure to capture.
Yep, I agree.
But maybe it's related to like documentation of dance or performance. which is,
Yeah.
We know you're not getting the thing, but it's a way of.
Marking time.
on, or, showing certain, I feel like that's the kind of documentation. That's really good that way.
Yeah, because like that one that you're, sorry, go ahead, honey. Yes, yeah, that one you're standing next to, it's the first time I've seen it lit this way. So it's lit from the top, it's lit from the side, and you really see this bobbly type of typography to it. And that's fascinating to me, because in other situations it didn't look that way. So they change, or even in trying to photograph them, whatever that image is, which I think is kind of great, is not what you would see if you saw it. If this one, you guys are looking at it this way, but if you go over there, it has all these weird ridges in it. So again, it changes.
I like the idea of it resisting documentation, but also how democratic you're being in the catalog by being able to show all the iterations. I show some accessibility that's really nice too.
Thank you.
Well, and just to add to that, I also think in addition to having a excitingly complicated and contradictory relationship to documentation, the proliferation also is a way of telling you that actually, you're not really getting it, that there is also, I think, complicated relationship even to the sense of sight, that photography has, only just begun weirdly to be talked about in relationship to touch. And also, frankly, if we insist on its objectness, to proprioception, and other senses that aren't in fact about touch at all, but you were discussing the ways that we get a sense of the electric in the cracks, but not to get too spectral,
Go
a
for
sense
it,
that
Jill.
you really need to be in the vibration, frankly, and that the only thing that the catalog can do is to tantalize you with an illusion. And
That's good.
which is, pretty exciting, but.
Yeah. Well, also, and I was really, I was really trying for that, that again, it's something that I used to do a lot of, that thing of, does that actually have a texture? Is it bobbly or is it flat? So again, there's that play between object and,
Okay.
Are we?
Well, we could obviously go on, and that's a key aspect of the foldogram as it continues to unfold. So,
There you go, darling. Yes. But thank you,
you.
everybody on Zoom for zooming in.
well, and just to add, if you joined us late, note in the chat that there are ways to click on the marvelous reviews of the show, as well as the interview with Ksenia Soboleva in Bonn. And please feel free to contact the gallery to acquire one of these tantalizing catalogs.
Because they're only
and
tantalizing.
to have a signed illusion.
Yes, a signed illusion, yes, yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, darling. You're great. Wonderful. More. Most fun. Now, I think what I need is a sharp.
Bye.
Hello, darling. Do you want a tantalizing illusion?